Is there a part of you that feels like you're not really showing up or speaking or acting in a way that is true to who you really are? Or do you feel an unexplainable urge to try something new, do something more with your life, and get outside your comfort zone? You're not really sure what that's going to look like, but you know that what you're doing right now isn't it. In this episode, the question I am posing is, are you speaking your truth? We're going to dive into what that even means, what it might look like if you are not speaking your truth, and also I'm going to share what I've learned as I've been navigating this journey and continue to navigate this journey of finding my voice. Also, at the end of this episode, I'm going to share a very simple, very overlooked yet powerful strategy that you can take action on right away, like right now today, to start getting you moving in the direction towards experiencing greater fulfillment and authenticity in your life. Our ability to influence others is directly impacted by the way we use our voices. After over 16 years coaching some of the world's biggest voices in business, music, TV, and film, I can say with certainty that if you have a voice, then you can learn to use it with confidence and skill. My name is Crystal Diaz. Welcome to the Vocal Branding Podcast. If you found out you only had one more year to live, what would you spend your time doing? This was a question that was raised at a networking dinner that I attended several months ago. And the person sitting next to me answered, well, I would spend my time traveling the world. And so I asked, oh, what's on your bucket list of places that you'd like to go see? And he looked at me rather perplexed and said, oh, I don't have a bucket list. And then he said, I actually don't really like traveling at all. And I said, well, if you only had one more year to live, why would you spend it traveling when you don't really like traveling? And he said, well, I hear everybody else saying that they want to travel, so I figured it must be the thing to do. So let's just break this down. He's got 1 year left to live, and he wants to spend it doing something that he has no desire to do or no previous desire to do, only because he thinks everyone else wants to do that, so it seems to be a safe answer. Now, granted, he may start traveling and decide that he actually loves it. But this conversation really had me thinking. It had me thinking about how easy it is to normalize the belief that we should do what everyone else is doing, follow the path that everyone else seems to be following. But how many times have you met somebody who's done exactly that, who has followed the safe path, so to speak, or has done everything that was expected of them, only to discover later in life that this career path or these life choices that they made wasn't what they wanted at all? One of my clients works in the finance sector, and she is dying to get a promotion. And yes, I mean that figuratively and literally. She's working from 8 a.m. every day. She stays in the office until at least midnight, she says. She spends the weekend sleeping to catch up on rest, and she has no social life at all. So I asked her, why are you spending so much time in the office? Are you rushing to complete a project? And she said, no, that's just typical. I stay there until midnight because it's good to be seen at those hours. And so then I asked her, why is it that you actually want to get this promotion? And she said, I want to be in a position of leadership. And so I asked her, why? Why do you want that? So I'll be more successful, she said. And what does that mean to be more successful for you? And she said, it means I will be happier. So you get promoted. Now you're in charge of people who feel obligated to work 16 hours plus every single day. Now, is this a life that inspires you? She paused for a minute and said, no. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to go after a promotion. Absolutely not. I'm not saying it's wrong to work 16-hour days. I have been known to put that many hours into building my own business as well. And I get it. But what I am saying is that I think it's important, and I'm saying this as a reminder to myself as well, to take a step back, take a breather, reconfigure our balance, really ask ourselves some deeper questions. Because working 16 plus hours every single day because it looks good to do that is not a sustainable way of life. That's not balance at all. It's kind of like in singing. Actually, I find lots of similarities between the practice of singing and the practice of life. And in singing, if you want to sing a note that is out of your range or a little bit uncomfortable for you to hit, and you want to do it with power, one way is to struggle and push and just force yourself to sing those notes. But actually, the better way is to learn to sing that note with balance by doing less so that you can sustain yourself on that note and then increase the power or build the power into that note as you continue to practice. And that's the more sustainable, healthier way of increasing your range and singing with more power. But if we do it the other way around, as in we push, we strain, we grind, we force our way through those parts of our voices, then we end up with either a damaged voice or vocal fatigue or just totally exhausted. And we end up wanting to give up, or we just hurt ourselves essentially. Now, interestingly, a large majority of the people who end up at our vocal studio for coaching, whether it's for speaking or singing, and if they are not a professional singer or a professional performer already, they usually fit a certain profile type. Typically, they are an adult who has already achieved success in their careers. They're very career oriented, actually. Usually they have a life partner, or maybe they have a young family, but they've spent their entire lives really head down focused on achieving those milestones in life, right? Graduate from college, get a good job, work up the ladder, build your career, have a family, etc. And they're at a point in their lives where they're looking for something different. They're looking for more joy. They're looking for creative inspiration. It's kind of like they've achieved all of these wonderful things, these great achievements. And then they ask themselves, okay, am I happy now? And if the answer is no, then the natural instinct is to think to ourselves, okay, well, I'll be happy when I get that next promotion, or I'll be happy when I get that raise, or when I go on that next holiday. But this I'll be happy when thought pattern is kind of problematic, right? On the one hand, it is important to keep evolving, and we should want that. We want to keep expanding and evolving. We want to keep achieving things. But on the other hand, we've all heard of that adage, which is happiness is not a destination, it's a journey. And so what happens is if we get caught up in this I'll be happy when thought pattern without taking a moment, taking a breath, just stepping back for a second and asking ourselves the deeper questions, then we could end up running around in circles chasing happiness, or running in the complete wrong direction and never realize it until it's too late. I have a good friend who is also the leader of a mastermind group that I'm in. Her name is Jamie Bright, and she is a pivot coach. So she works with high-level entrepreneurs, helping them to navigate towards a new direction in their businesses. She helps them to re-envision or reignite the passion and purpose behind their business. And I remember her sharing that one of the common signs that a person is ready to pivot is that their heart is no longer in what they are doing. So they're doing the work, they're doing what they need to do, but their heart's not in it. At the same time, though, there's so much fear around making change, especially when it's something that you've built, you've spent time cultivating, you've established a reputation in it even. And I'm sharing this with you because this questioning of our life choices, I think, is something most of us go through. And it's a topic that can be hard to talk about. It's not something that really lends itself easily to standard everyday conversations, right? It's not like somebody's going to say, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm questioning my life choices. I've kind of lost my way, lost my purpose a little bit, but otherwise, same old, right? It's not really a conversation starter, or it could be. It could be an interesting one. But the idea here is that if we start wondering about the choices that we've made from our past and we start questioning it, things come up for us, emotions come up for us, like, what will people think? Will people think that I'm being irresponsible, that I'm hitting a midlife crisis? Will people think I'm crazy for wanting a different life? What will my family think? But let's think about this a little deeper. Let's look at it from a different angle. Ask yourself this question. Is it realistic to expect that the choices we made back in our 20s are going to be the same choices that we would want to make now in our lives now? Are they the same choices that's going to fulfill us based on who we are now? I don't know about you, but I'm definitely not the same person that I was when I was in my 20s. I mean, I don't even think I'm the same person that I was a year ago, to be honest. But this expectation that we're just supposed to know what we want at the age of 21, right after college, can actually lead us to, I think, choose paths that we think we should want because it looks good on paper, or because it's what everyone else seems to want as well, or it's what our family wants us to do. And in our 20s, that totally makes sense, right? It makes sense to do that because what do we know when we're in our 20s, really, right? And so it makes sense to just work with the information that we have. And sometimes that does mean looking outside of ourselves and seeing what everyone else is doing and assessing our choices in that manner. But if it's true that we aren't the same person that we were in our 20s, then it makes sense for us to then question whether the life we thought we wanted back then is really what we want now. But this is the question that is easy to suppress, that it's easy to overlook because we are focusing on the grind. We're focusing on just getting the job done. And this is a hard conversation to have. So if you find yourself thinking, I'll be happy when, or I'll only do the things I'm passionate about when all of these other things are just done and out of the way, and on top of that, your heart is not really in what you are doing and it just feels like a grind every single day, then perhaps these are signs that you are not speaking your truth. And that's not a bad thing at all. It can be a scary thing to admit, but it's not bad. I look at it as your inner voice inviting you to make a choice. You can keep grinding, you can keep doing what you're doing, or maybe you are being called to something else, something bigger, something that far exceeds the scope of your imagination. When I graduated from university, I had at the time already convinced myself that music wasn't my thing, that I was not meant to pursue singing or pursue music at all. And so I ended up studying film in college, and I graduated and I joined a film production company, and I joined the marketing department team. It was a steady job, and I was doing it for about 2.5 years actually, but my heart was not in what I was doing. I knew that that wasn't something that I was passionate about. Having said that, I also know that if I wanted to, and I decided to grind, to push through, I would be successful in that position. I know that I would be. But I knew that my heart wasn't in what I was doing, and I was constantly looking for happiness outside of my career choice. I kept thinking, I'll be happy when it's 5 o'clock, when I get to get off work. I'll be happy when it's the weekend, right? I'll grind now and I'll be happy when. So these are clear signs, right? That I wasn't speaking my truth. And that realization actually led me to becoming a voice coach. So I pivoted into a completely different career. I went back into music actually. And I ended up building a really solid reputation in the music industry. I was very, very busy. I had students coming to me, and I was working with my family as well, which was wonderful. But I was also burning myself out. I enjoyed working with my students. I really enjoyed coaching. But several years into this, the idea that my life was going to be filled with one-on-one coaching, and that's it, really did not make my heart sing. I loved what I did, but I also knew I started to get that feeling that there was a call towards something bigger. So at that point, I ended up making another shift, which was expanding my reach outside of Hong Kong. I started a YouTube channel. I ended up building a course. I built a singing membership, as well as an online community of people from around the world who are all connected through their joy of singing and their love of singing. And in recent years, I've actually made a slightly different shift as well. I'd spent my entire career up until that point living and breathing all things singing. And I finally realized that, yes, I love singing. I love talking about singing. I love coaching singing. But that's not the only thing that I really love talking about. That's not the only thing that I love to dive into. I also love talking about and researching mindset. I love psychology, understanding human behavior. And so as a result, I've been giving myself more and more permission to give voice to these other passions of mine, which is why you are now listening to the Vocal Branding Podcast. Throughout my personal journey, and also through my experience coaching my clients who are also on similar journeys of wanting to find and amplify their authentic voice and speak their truth, there are a few things that I've learned that have really helped me to stay on the path, to keep moving forward, to avoid getting stuck in the grind. And so I want to share them with you here in this podcast today. The first thing I've learned is that speaking your truth and seeking to live authentically is an evolving journey. If you're lucky, you will know exactly what that looks like for you. But if you are like most of us, it will be a process of discovery. It's going to involve you being very open-minded and making small shifts in your thoughts, your beliefs, and your behaviors. I like to think of it as calibrating your navigation equipment as you are navigating through the journey of life. Now, the changes that you decide to make don't actually have to be huge, big, sweeping changes in order for them to be meaningful. They can be nuanced, they can be very subtle. As my good friend Richard Ralston says, tiny steps taken over a period of time lead to quantum leaps. The second thing I've learned is that there are always signs. There are signs when you are not speaking your truth, and there are signs when you are starting to move down a path that really sings to you, that really speaks to you. But you have to be willing to look for them. You have to be open-minded to see them. We talked about some of those signs earlier in this podcast, which is the "I'll be happy when" thought pattern. So if you find yourself constantly thinking or saying, "I'll be happy when," or if you find that your heart is just not in what you're doing anymore, your heart's just not in it, then those are clear signs that you are not speaking your truth. But there are other signs as well. For example, sudden health warnings. So for me, one of the clear signs that I know something needs to shift in my life or in the choices that I'm making is that I get exhausted or I have troubles falling asleep. Insomnia is always a sign for me. There was one time in my life where I was not sleeping and I suddenly broke out in hives all down my body. And I went to the doctors, I did all kinds of tests, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. The doctors that I went to would just send me home with antihistamine and say, that's too bad, right? But it wasn't until I made some pretty significant changes when those hives started to recede, and then they've never come back. Let's touch wood on that one. Now, the third thing I've learned about this journey is that the how will show up. And this one is a hard one for me too. So what this means is you don't actually have to know exactly what speaking your truth will look like for you before you start taking steps towards that direction. But so often we want to know exactly what it's going to look like before we do anything. We want to know exactly what our end goal is. But in this case, a lot of it is to do with discovery and being open. And this journey actually is more effective and more exciting if you go about it with curiosity, with openness, with childlike curiosity. Just taking one step, start moving in some kind of direction and allowing for opportunities to show up for you. This has happened to me pretty much at every point in my journey when I've decided to make a few changes. For example, before I quit my marketing job, I knew that my heart wasn't in it. I knew I needed to make some change. I didn't know how that change was going to happen. And it just so happened that my mother, who is also a very well-known, renowned singer and voice coach, invited me to observe her teaching. At the time, I had no desire of being a voice coach. That was not something that was in my plan at all. But I was curious. And so I didn't quit my job yet. I actually would go in the weekends to watch my mother coach. And I just went with open curiosity. I was genuinely very curious because I knew some of the transformations that were happening with the students that she was working with. And I was curious. I wanted to see what was going on. And because I followed that curiosity and that invitation and I walked through that door, it led me to a path that I could not have expected or even planned out for myself. So these 3 lessons have really helped me to stay committed to speaking my truth, to living as authentically as possible, and to avoid getting stuck in a grind and feeling stagnant. So just to summarize again, the first one is knowing that finding your truth is an evolving journey because you are an evolving human. Sometimes all you need to do is make a few small nuanced changes to recalibrate your navigation instrument and suddenly see the world in a whole new way. Number two is that there are always signs. There are always signs that show up that tell you you are not speaking your truth or you may not be living authentically and that it's time for some kind of recalibration. But you have to choose to take notice of them. Number three is the how will show up. So don't get fixated on the belief that you have to know exactly what it is that you want and how it is that you're going to do it before you start moving. Start moving first, and the opportunities and the insights will come to you. Now, you might be asking, okay, well, that makes sense. But what if you really are stuck? What if you want to start moving? You want to take that first step, but you don't know what that step should be. Now, at the end of this episode, I'm going to share something that has always helped me, something that you can take action on right away, that is surprisingly easy, and it will not interfere with the realistic responsibilities that you have going on in your life. So I'm going to share that with you at the end of this episode. And before we get to that, I wanted to let you know about the opportunity to watch a masterclass that I previously ran. So authenticity for me is when there is an alignment between your internal state and your external expression. So it's when your inner world and your outer world are in alignment. And of course, the way you use your voice is an integral part of your external expression, of how you show up in the world. So maybe you know you want to make some changes in your life. You know what changes you want to make even. And on an internal level, you know what it is that you want to say. You know what you want to share with the world. But your voice, your physical voice, is not supporting your message. For example, maybe every time you speak up or have to present in front of others or present your ideas, your voice gets stuck, it gets croaky, or people can't hear you and your message ultimately gets lost. Previously, I ran a masterclass where I taught 3 simple ways to change the way that you use your voice to increase your authority and presence and to let your authenticity shine through. You'd be surprised at how these little tweaks can already make your message land with greater impact and clarity. And I'm offering this replay available for free for a limited time. So if you want to learn the 3 simple changes that you can make to your external voice to make what you want to say stand out and land more confidently, then head on over to crystaldiaz.com/masterclass. That's Crystal with a K. So in this episode, the question I posed was, are you speaking your truth? If you've noticed some of the signs and they are pointing you to start questioning whether you are really living authentically, but you don't want to make huge sweeping changes, maybe it's not practical or responsible for you to do so at this point in time, what's one thing you can do or one step you can take that can actually help you recalibrate your navigation equipment to reignite your purpose? Renowned best-selling author, researcher, and lecturer, Dr. Joe Dispenza says, to truly change, you have to think greater than your environment. In other words, you got to step outside of the routine of your usual environment because we so often get conditioned into the same patterns of behavior, into the same patterns of thinking, especially when we are stuck in the same environment. And so one simple way to do this, without actually having to move countries, is by cultivating creative expression. Do something creatively expressive. Creative writing, painting, drawing, of course, singing. I'm always going to be an advocate for that. Dancing, photography. Pick one thing that allows you to be creatively expressive. And don't do it half-heartedly either. Commit to immersing yourself in it for a period of time. And don't worry about mastering these creative outlets as well. That's not what this is about. Without creative self-expression, we can end up feeling stifled. We can get caught up in non-empowering thought patterns and not even realize it. And it can be really hard when we are stuck in this cycle to think greater than our environment. Now, my high achievers out there might be thinking, I don't have time for dance, or what's the return on investment for singing? Okay, so hear me out. Creative expression encourages us to turn inward, right? And it also encourages us to sidestep our logical thinking patterns. So when we do that, we can actually start to access the deeper parts of ourselves, and we can create new pathways of thinking, literally create new ways of behaving. And so practicing creative expression, like singing, dancing, writing, all of that requires intention, it requires dedication, and it also encourages you to be courageous and vulnerable. Things like meditation and breath work are also examples of activities that will enable you to do this as well. You see, when we are more open to new ways of thinking, we're allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. That's really when the magic happens. And all it takes is one inspirational thought or one inspirational intuitive hit to transform us in ways that we cannot predict. So if you are wondering, what's the return on investment in singing or creative writing or dance or art? The answer is it's an infinite return because the possibilities are quite literally endless. Creative expression is always going to be an investment that we make in ourselves. It's also going to be an invitation to think outside the box, to think greater than our environment, to tap into that our deeper selves. And when we do that, new doors of opportunities will start opening up to you in very unexpected and surprising ways. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, be sure to give me a little thumbs up. Send me a comment as well. Let me know what some of your takeaways are. Any thoughts you may have about this episode today, I'd love to hear it. And if you are watching on YouTube, consider subscribing to the channel and checking out some of the other content that I have here. And if you are listening to this on podcast, then do consider following and downloading my podcast so that you can be notified every time a new episode comes out as well. Until next time.